Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Brass Chat, the weekly chat show from Brass Bands England. And I'm Ellen Minshall from the Brass Foundations team, and I'm delighted to welcome this evening our special guest, Pat Jackman, who's the Joint Principal Bass Trombonist at the Orchestra of the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden. So welcome, Pat.
Hello, nice to be here.
Delighted that you could give up some of your time this evening to come and have a chat with us. I first met you, Pat, when we'd just been to watch my son at his final recital at the Royal Academy of Music, and he always speaks extremely highly of you. My son Simon Minshall, the bass trombonist, and Pat taught him, and he always speaks so highly of you. So I just want to find out a little bit more about you, and maybe if you've got any advice for young players that are up and coming. So you're going to tell us a little bit, Pat, about where and when you started playing.
Yeah, I started at the Royal College of Music in 1983. I was at the junior college before that, and basically just played the trombone because it was the only instrument that I took to. I started playing the violin and that sort of thing, but I never really liked it. And then the trombone I liked a lot. I studied there with Jerry McAlone, who was also at the Covent Garden, bass trombone player there for many years. Arthur Wilson, who was a great influence, they both were. And then I left college and I was very lucky. I got a job in the D'Oyly Carte Orchestra opera company, which was just playing Gilbert and Sullivan. I did that for a few years and then did some freelancing and did a few West End shows, Depping and a few orchestras, and did a bit of Sackbut playing, which in the late 80s, that really took off. There were lots of people doing reconstructions of things from Venetian coronations and things like that. So there were lots of Sackbuts on, and I did sort of half and half for a while, for a few years, half playing the Sackbut, half playing the trombone, and did that for about 20 years. And then about 10-11 years ago, lucky enough to get a job in the opera house in the orchestra there. So that's all I've been doing. I've been sort of a jobbing bass trombone player for whatever that is, 30 years.
Right.
And loved every minute of it, I have to say.
Oh, that's great. That's really fantastic to hear. So tell us a little bit about the Sackbut. I bet there's some youngsters watching tonight who maybe don't know what a Sackbut is. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, well, that's just the forerunner to the trombone. It's what they use, what Gabrielli and Monteverdi used 400 years ago, 500 years ago, and it's just a much smaller dimensions, and that's what we've used to play all that sort of music. And I used to teach at the academy. That's where I met Simon and others. I taught there for about 10 years, teaching the early trombones, and it was just to give guys another chance and girls another chance to have a go at something different, just as you might play the euphonium or the contrabass trombone or the alto trombone, whatever. And most of them came along, had a few lessons, and a few of them have sort of continued doing it. But it's just another string to your bow when you leave college, really, if you're a young player. And it's exactly the same technique. You know, they like you to play on authentic mouthpieces and authentic instruments, but it's basically the same thing, really. And I love the music. The music, we used to, play lots of Mozart as well, and Haydn and stuff like that. And that's all great music with some fantastic writing for trombones.
Oh, that's great. So what is life like in the pit?
Great. I love it. It's being in the pit is very different because there's a lot less. It's more anonymous. You can sort of sit quietly. You can nip out. So when we do the ring or something like that, and you've got to do a 25-minute break, if you're doing it on stage, you just have to sit there. Well, I mean, you can enjoy the music, but when you're in the pit, you can nip out, and have a coffee, whatever, and relax outside the pit. And we do play some fantastic music. I mean, since we went back properly in September, because obviously with all the pandemic and everything, that working practice everywhere has been very, very difficult and
indeed.
interrupted. Yeah, and we were very lucky. We were paid a certain amount of our salary, and we did bits throughout the sort of 18 months of it. But we've gone back full time in September, and we've been doing Romeo and Juliet, the ballet, and the Nutcracker, and we've done Your New Firm, we've done Magic Flute and Traviata, and we've just started doing Tosca. So I mean, we've been full on. Yeah. Absolutely full on, and the music's fantastic. I mean, it's sometimes you have to play the same piece 10 times, 15 times, but you get 10 or 15 goes at it. So you like to think you get it right once, which is nice. It's very different to playing on stage. I mean, I love playing on stage, but I guess the pressure is slightly less. So we've got a lot of young players coming into the band now. I've got a fantastic new first clarinet who's very young, and string players coming in who are young. So it's not an old man's place being in the pit, certainly, but you do tend to get some of the older players like to prefer ending up there if possible, because it's the pressure's off slightly. Yeah, if I can say that.
It's a double section, isn't it, that you have there at the Royal Opera House?
Yeah, there's two firsts, 2 seconds, 2 thirds, just the one tuba. We don't have a tuba at the moment. The Ben Thompson, who was the tuba player there for a few years, has just gone to the LSO. Right. So he wants to be on stage and play all the fantastic symphonies and everything in turn the world. Most of us have sort of been lucky enough to do that in the past. Yeah. And we have one principal trombone, that's Lindsay Schilling. 2 seconds, that's Mike Hext and Rob Holliday, and then myself and Keith McNichol. Yes. I believe you know Keith.
He had the same brass teacher as me at school up in Ayrshire in Scotland.
yeah. And he loves the Contra, so he does a lot of the Contra playing. And
I was going to ask you that.
And it's great. Sorry.
I was just going to ask you that. When you do Wagner, who goes on Contra?
Keith loves the Contra, and he's absolutely amazing at it. So he likes to do that. I do it occasionally, but he likes to play the Contra, and he's so good at it that, of course, I wouldn't like to stand in his way. But we do so many shows. I mean, I'm not sure exactly, but we do over 200 shows in 11 months. So with lots of double days, and I mean, if you did the whole thing as one person, you'd be on 6, sometimes 7 days a week, once, twice a day. So that's why it's double. And there's a lot of people since the pandemic. The Royal Opera House have made quite a few cuts. So there's 116 in the orchestra, and there's 29 vacancies. So there's a lot of people who had left or took voluntary redundancy and have since left. So there's quite a lot of opportunity. So we are seeing we're seeing a lot of extra players coming, which is fantastic.
Right, that's great. Are there any particular players who really inspire you?
Well, my main inspiration years ago was a chap called Ray Premru. He was the bass trombone player in the Philharmonia and in the Philip Jones Brass Ensemble, and he had the most fantastic sound, and he was a really nice guy. I was lucky enough to meet him a few times, and he was fantastic inspiration. I'm not a great listener of trombone music, it has to be said, of players, but most of my inspiration came from the guys I used to hang around with when I started. Guys like Arthur Wilson and Roger Brenner and Roger Groves and Mike Hext, who are now lucky enough to work with, all those are the guys who sort of looked after you and taught you how to behave.
I guess that's
Andy Forbert, Ron Bryans. I mean, there's some famous brass band names amidst all that. And so I'd like to think I could sort of carry on their tradition of how to behave as a trombone player rather than listening to things. But I mean, there's some amazing players around at the moment, especially in bass trombones. I mean, when I was just teaching the Sackbut, and I taught a few of them, I've sneaked in a couple of bass trombone lessons, but I mean, there was Simon, your son, Simon Mitchell, and Joe Arnold, who's now at English National Opera. James Buckle, who's now in the Philharmonia, Sam Freeman, Ed Hilton, all, you know, doing very well now, coming through. So I was very lucky to teach three of them, and then other trombone players, you know, orchestrally, you know, Pete Moore and Byron Fulcher and all these sort of guys, dozens and dozens of fantastic players out there. So the future looks good.
Must give you a great sense of pride to have been involved in the teaching of some of them. I know when I teach a player and they make it really big, I think, oh, you know, it's such a proud thing to do.
Yeah,
teaching, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been lucky enough to sort of sit next to them or hear them. And I mean, at the academy, I used to teach, as I said, at the Royal Academy. Bob, who's the great, he was a great inspiration as well. I mean, the most meticulous, fantastic player. And he is the teacher who deserves most of the credit for all that lot coming through now. But you know, I'd like to think I had a tiny part in it. But yeah, it does. It's great to see all these guys doing really, really well and being successful. I'm sure I've missed someone off the list of the people I've taught, so I do apologise if I have.
If you had to give a couple of pieces of advice to any youngsters thinking about a career on the trombone or on the bass trombone, what would be?
Ooh. Well, obviously, do your practice, listen to the music. But for me, it's always been trying to behave properly and trying to, you know, do the right thing when you actually are there working. Don't be too pushy. Get the teas or the beers in after the concert, whatever.
Oh yeah, did you teach Simon to do that?
That's probably came from you lot, didn't it? I should think. But you know, and just take it all in and enjoy it. I think one of the things, you know, a lot of people get terribly frustrated if the phone isn't ringing and get very stressed out about it, and also have something else to do. I think one of the big things is to have an interest, whether it's something you can do to earn money or whether it's a pastime or a hobby. You know, it's just something to keep you interested, so that if there are down times when you haven't got a lot of work, you can actually do something else. I used to I've always collected books and been interested in books. I always used to buy and sell books, you know, like on eBay, things like that. And that kept me going. You'd have quiet months where you weren't doing anything. And I used to do that. But it's something else to do. Don't pin all your hopes on and sit by the phone, you know, and enjoy it.
All right. So you must get the opportunity to go on lots of fantastic tours with the orchestra. Can you think of what's the best tour you've ever been on?
Ooh. Well, in the Opera House, we do one big tour, and that's once every 4 years. We go to Japan,
Right,
and that was, I think was that 2 years ago. But I went to Japan, actually, taking a certain Simon Minchell as the other bass trombone player. On that trip, that was absolutely fantastic. We stayed in Tokyo for 2.5 weeks, and we played Faust by Gounod, and we played Otello, Verdi's Otello, and that was wonderful. Before I was at the Opera House, I especially in the 1990s, there was lots of touring. All the orchestras were going all over the place. I mean, that's changed quite a lot. I mean, especially going to Japan. I went to Japan a lot of times with the Academy St. Martin in the Fields and the LPO. Particular favourites? Oh, goodness me. I went to South Africa a long time ago, and it was supposed to be the first with the LPO. That was London Philharmonic Orchestra, and that was going as supposedly the first band post-apartheid. I mean, that was very interesting, wonderful, absolutely wonderful place. And with the early music groups, with groups like the Gabrieli Consort and the Orchestra of Age of Enlightenment, I used to do them. We used to do fantastic tours. Especially in very obscure places around Europe. We used to go to places in Spain that were amazing, Burgos and Lerma, and just very obscure places. You go to a certain place because it had an organ in a church that played at a certain pitch, and then you take 30 singers and 15 wind players of odd instruments, including sackbuts. You know, we had great time doing that. Yeah.
Do you have a favourite opera?
I love the Magic Flute, Mozart's. I've got a most hated opera, and that's Traviata. I can quite comfortably say that's the one I hate the most. We've just done that, and I can't bear it. But probably because we play it so many times. The playing the ring is fantastic. I've done that a couple of times, the full ring, and we're quite lucky because there's a Contra and a bass trombone in it. So I've done that a couple of times. That's fantastic. To play the ring, and all the Strauss like Electra and Salome, they're very, very hard, but they're great to play. And then new operas that you only see once or twice. We're currently doing Nabucco, which is a Verdi opera, which is great. It's really nice. We don't get to play that very often. But I love the ballet music as well. I've got to say, I know a lot of people at the Opera House think that the ballet is just paid practice, but I love the ballet. I love the Romeo, especially Romeo and Juliet by Prokofiev, and the Tchaikovsky ballets like Nutcracker and Swan Lake, and even Sleeping Beauty, which goes on a bit. But yeah, there's very little there that I don't actually like.
Right. Well, I think my favourite of all time is Montagues and Capulets. I just love listening to that bass trombone tuba part.
Yeah, it really is, and doing that is a great highlight. I mean, it's not exactly the most technically advanced thing you're ever going to play, but yes, it is. One of the trumpet players, Dan Newell, who's the principal cornet and also obviously plays trumpet and everything at the Opera House. He says, "Oh, I always get terrible bass trombone envy when that bit comes up." He loves listening to that bit. But yes, that's what, that's C tuba. You get the guys coming in playing on the big C tuba. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I did once have the privilege of listening to both of my children playing that together. Simon on bass trombone and Sam on tuba. It was quite something. So, do you have a favourite conductor? Dare I ask that question?
Mm-hmm. Next question.
Anyone you particularly enjoy working under?
I was very, very lucky. I mean, I always say I'm very lucky because when I started working, I did a few concerts with George Scholti and Klaus Tenstedt, who were amazing. Big Germanic and very rude to everyone and very dictatorial, and they did amazing concerts. And I've worked with lots of fantastic conductors. Our principal conductor, who's Tony Papano, he's great. I like him. Have a lot of time for him. But nowadays, the guy who's been in a lot some years ago, he hasn't been in for a while. Andris Nelsons is he's Latvian, and he comes in. He's fantastic. We all like him. He gets a lot out of the orchestra, and he never gives you a hard time. He's always smiling, and we always do great concerts with him. Possibly my favourite conductor of all, well, two. Thinking about it, Sir Neville Mariner, who used to work with a lot in the Academy at St Martin in the Fields. He was lovely. He was maybe not the greatest technician, but he was a great guy. Always did great concerts, and was always very generous. You do a long trip to America. When we went to America and did 10 concerts or something, and then he put on a massive party at the end of it, which he paid for. I liked him, and I liked Charles McKerris as well. He was great. He was always did great concerts with him. Very lucky to work a lot with him. Possibly a favourite concert was doing the Rhine Journey immolation scene from Gotterdammerung with McKerris, and that was, he'd had cancer then, and that was very shortly before he died, and that was amazing. That was absolutely fantastic concert.
Right. Can you think of any players in the orchestra who are not brass players who you find really inspirational?
Oh yeah, goodness. Yes, I mean at the Opera House we've got some amazing instrumentalists. They won't see this, so they won't be embarrassed because they probably won't get to see this. But we have Andrea de Flamineis is the principal bassoon. He's astonishing. He's a sort of, and Matt Glendenning is a guy I mentioned earlier. He's a new first clarinet. He's about 24 or something.
Yeah.
And they're guys who just seem to know exactly how the music should be played. And they're astonishing. When you hear them play, it really does lift the whole band. You know, all the current Dan Newell, who plays all the cornet solos in Romeo and things like that, is a fantastic player, and you can guarantee they're always going to get it, always going to nail it. Nick Betts, who's a current first trumpet great player, and a man who's recently left us sadly, Ian Balmain, was he was the first trumpet. He died sadly about 18 months ago, and he was amazing. I mean, a lot of trumpet players I was lucky to work with years ago. Maurice Murphy, I didn't work with him as much as others, but you know, these guys could just lift an orchestra single-handedly in the space of a few notes. And my favourite one of all was a chap called Laurie Evans, who was the principal trumpet in the LPO for many years, and he was just astonishing. You know, him and Morris, just the sort of guys that could just, as I say, and Ian Balmain sense, just single-handedly lift the piece you were playing, the whole orchestra.
Yeah.
You know, it was incredible.
Fantastic. What's the absolute craziest gig you've ever done? The most unreal, the craziest gig. Can you think of any?
Goodness me, not sure I can. I've done a few quite scary things in churches where they told us, right, we want you to play a fanfare from up there, and you sort of climb up a load of steps, and you're hanging on to a very rickety sort of 500-year-old brass railing which could fall off at any point. But no, I mean, I've never done a lot of lighter stuff. I'm definitely not a jazzer, I'm swing like a lead balloon, as they say, and I'm most certainly not a brass band player. Apologies for that to everyone. So I'm very much a symphony Sid, you know, classical player. But yeah, I mean, concert. I keep saying I've been lucky, but you know, playing in Carnegie Hall and playing in the big halls in Japan and everything. So it's amazing when you sit and there's thousands of people there. Sitting listening to you, but crazy, no. Some that have perhaps had some misbehaviour involved, but I wouldn't like to go into all that.
All right. So, have you got anything on between now and Christmas with the orchestra? What's coming up soon?
Yes, yeah, we've got we're doing performances of Tosca, and they're cramming them in. We've got 2 performances of Tosca in a day tomorrow. And then we're rehearsing Nabucco. We've got performances of the Nutcracker. We've got trying to have a look at the diary. But I mean, we're working full on.
Yeah.
We're working up to Christmas Eve, and then I think we get 3 days off, and then it's back in again, and then they start, and then it's easier for the trombones because they start doing Figaro and they start doing things that we're not in, so we get a bit of downtime. It's pretty full on. It's pretty full on job. It's fantastic. It's hard work, has to be said, but you know, worthwhile. You know.
So it sounds like you enjoy your lifestyle and that you've chosen the best career that you possibly could, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you know, and a lot of it's down to sort of, you know, socializing and trying to behave properly and trying to take the knocks. One of the big things is we all get knocks and setbacks, and you might be on trial for a job and you don't get the job, and you've got to take that the right way, and you've got to come back and work just as hard, and you might sit there for weeks waiting for the phone to ring and it doesn't, and it's always important to try and make the most of it, and to make the most of your friends and your family, and stick with it. I mean, you were saying about advice to
I was just thinking that's a really important piece of advice, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, listen to the older guys, or the guys in orchestras, and set up your own groups. There's quite a few, especially in the early music side. Quite a lot of them who I work with, they set groups up and were very successful. You know, brass groups. There's a couple of fantastic trombone quartets at the moment that have just suddenly appeared. I think they were there pre-COVID, but with a lot of these fantastic young players, Josh Chatina there's a bass trombone players in the group, and and another one which is Izzy Dawes and Merrin and Angus Buck, you know, and there's there's fantastic young players out there, and you know, go for it, but be prepared to work hard and to suffer the setbacks, but come back stronger. I think that's really important. You've got to. I mean, I was on trial for goodness knows at least 20 jobs and never got them. And you know, sometimes it's disappointing, sometimes it's understandable, but you've just got to get on with it and keep going. So, as somebody said, when I got, I mean, I've been freelancing for, I don't know, 25 years before I got my one and only job in the opera house. And I remember someone saying, "Oh, well, if you can get a job, anyone can." And I know what he meant, you know. And he's exactly right, you know, that you can stick at it and keep going, and having a job is not the be all and end all, you know, because being a freelancer is fantastic. You know, there's lots of variety. You know, you can be doing a West End show one day, and you can be playing with a symphony orchestra the next day, and you might be doing if you're lucky, you might be doing a film session or something. You know, you can be doing anything, setting up your own group and doing things here and there, and a bit of teaching. Teaching's always important. You know, there's not as much as there was, but it's great to do a bit. I sort of stopped teaching because I felt I'd you know, fulfilled my everything I could do. I mean, teaching the Sackbut, there's only about, especially with the guys nowadays, they can play the thing after about half an hour. So it's just teach them a bit of repertoire, and then that's about it. You know, go out and do it.
Yeah. Well, it's been really fantastic talking to you, Pat, and I know I really do appreciate all you've done for my son, and I'm sure for his colleagues at the academy and for all the young people that you've taught. They found you such an inspiration, and it's very, very uplifting to hear such positivity in the music world at this difficult time as we get things up and moving again. So thank you so much for giving up your time to come and talk to us, and all the very best for 2022.
Thank you.
And please pass on my best wishes to Keith as well.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. It's been lovely, and I will send your best wishes on. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Pat. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.